The November rain hammered against the pavement of downtown Norfolk, Virginia, turning the streets into reflective mirrors of neon and headlights. The USS Wisconsin Museum stood illuminated against the dark sky, its imposing naval architecture a fitting backdrop for tonight's event. The annual Admiral's Honor Gala, one of the most prestigious gatherings in the United States Navy's social calendar. Maya crossed it across the street, watching a procession of black town cars and limousines depositing their passengers beneath the grand entrance canopy. Officers in dress whites and blues emerged with their spouses, the women draped in elegant gowns that probably cost more than Maya's entire year's rent. She looked down at her own attire, a simple black cocktail dress she'd found at a department store, modest heels, and a small clutch purse. No jewelry except for a pair of silver earrings her mother had given her before she died. She took a deep breath, tasting the salt air that blew in from the harbor, and crossed the street. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, forwarded through a series of encrypted channels before landing in her civilian email account. It bore the seal of the Chief of Naval Operations and requested her presence at the gala honoring the retirement of Admiral James Thornton, a man she'd never met, but whose operations she'd supported more times than she could count. The invitation felt like a test, maybe even a trap. After 5 years of living in the shadows, of existing in the gray spaces between acknowledgement and denial, Maya had learned to trust nothing at face value. But something had compelled her to come tonight. Perhaps the simple human need to be seen, to be recognized as more than a ghost in the machine of national security. As she approached the entrance, 2 security personnel immediately stepped forward. Both were young, probably Navy Shore Patrol, assigned to screen guests. The taller one, a square-jawed petty officer with a name tag reading Morrison, held up his hand. "Ma'am, can I see your invitation?" Maya reached into her clutch and produced the embossed card. Morrison took it, his eyes scanning the elegant calligraphy before his brow furrowed. He glanced at his partner, a woman with sharp features and suspicious eyes. "This doesn't have a +1 designation," Morrison said, his tone shifting from professional to adversarial. "And I don't see your name on the primary guest list." "It's there," Maya replied calmly. "Check the supplemental roster." The female officer, whose name tag read Chun, typed something into a tablet. Her frown deepened. "I'm not seeing a Maya cross anywhere." "Ma'am, where did you get this invitation?" "It was sent to me." "By whom?" "I can't disclose that information." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, if you can't provide verification of your invitation's authenticity, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. This is a high-security event with flag officers and foreign dignitaries in attendance." Maya felt a familiar sensation of frustration building in her chest, the kind that came from years of having your existence questioned, your service doubted, your sacrifices dismissed because they happened in places that officially didn't exist and were carried out by people who officially weren't there. "I understand your concerns," Maya said, keeping her voice level. "But I was invited." "If you contact the CNO's office." "The Chief of Naval Operations doesn't send invitations to unauthorized personnel," Morrison interrupted. He was getting agitated now, one hand drifting toward the radio clipped to his belt. "Ma'am, I need you to leave the premises immediately or I'll have to call for backup." Other guests were beginning to notice the confrontation. A few officers slowed their approach, watching with curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. Maya could feel their eyes on her, this woman in her cheap dress, causing a scene at their exclusive event. She could read their thoughts as clearly as if they'd spoken aloud. "Who does she think she is?" "I'm not leaving," Maya said quietly. "I have every right to be here." Chun stepped closer, her hand now resting on the expandable baton at her hip. "Ma'am, you need to leave now. Don't make this difficult." The rain had started to seep through Maya's dress, cold water trickling down her back. She stood her ground, aware that she was creating exactly the kind of attention she'd spent years avoiding. But something inside her refused to back down. She'd bled for this country. She'd killed for it. She'd lost friends, lost pieces of her soul in places whose names would never appear in any official record. And now she was being treated like a party crasher, a nobody trying to sneak into a world she didn't belong to. "Call your supervisor," Maya said, her voice hardening. "Call Commander Patterson from Naval Intelligence. He'll verify." "We're not calling anyone." Morrison cut her off. He grabbed Maya's arm, his grip firm but not yet painful. "You need to leave. Now." That's when Maya felt it. The slight shift of fabric against her left shoulder as Morrison's hand jostled her dress. The sleeve of her cocktail dress, which had carefully covered her upper arm all evening, slipped down about 3 inches, just enough to reveal what lay beneath. The tattoo was small, no larger than a silver dollar, positioned precisely where it would normally remain hidden under any standard uniform or civilian attire. To most observers, it would look like nothing more than an abstract design, intersecting lines and geometric shapes rendered in black ink. But to those who knew, to those who had clearance to know, it was instantly recognizable. The black dagger. Morrison didn't see it. He was too focused on trying to escort Maya away from the entrance. But someone else did. A voice cut through the rain and the murmur of arriving guests, sharp with authority and unmistakable command presence. "Release that woman." Immediately, everyone froze. Maya turned her head to see a man in formal Navy dress uniform striding toward them, his shoulders bearing the 4 stars of full Admiral. But it wasn't just any Admiral. Even in the dim light and rain, Maya recognized him from the classified briefings she'd attended years ago. Admiral Robert Caldwell, Supreme Allied Commander of NATO's maritime forces. He was supposed to be in Brussels. The fact that he was here in Norfolk, at this particular gala, sent Maya's tactical mind into overdrive. Something was happening. Something big. Caldwell's eyes weren't on Morrison or Chun. They were locked on Maya's exposed shoulder, on the tattoo that had emerged from beneath her sleeve. His expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, recognition, and then something that looked almost like respect. "Sir, this woman doesn't have proper authorization," Morrison began, but Caldwell silenced him with a single gesture. The Admiral approached Maya directly, stopping 3 feet away. Up close, she could see the weight of command in his weathered face, the gray at his temples, the ribbons on his chest that told stories of decades of service across multiple conflicts and operations. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, a silent conversation passed between them, a recognition that transcended rank, protocol, and the official records that would never acknowledge what she'd done. Admiral Caldwell straightened his posture and rendered a slow, deliberate salute. The gesture hung in the air like a thunderclap. The entrance to the USS Wisconsin Museum had gone utterly silent. The rain continued its steady percussion against the canopy, but every conversation had ceased, every movement frozen in tableau. Morrison's hand was still on Maya's arm, though his grip had gone slack with confusion. Chin stood with her mouth slightly open, her hand fallen away from her baton. The arriving guests, a collection of Navy brass, defense contractors, and diplomatic personnel, all stared at the impossible scene unfolding before them. A 4-star admiral, not just any admiral, but the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO maritime forces, was saluting a woman in a department store dress who moment ago had been on the verge of being forcibly removed from the premises. Maya's training kicked in automatically, despite every instinct screaming at her to remain invisible, to deflect attention. She returned Admiral Caldwell's salute with textbook precision. Her hand moved her brow with the muscle memory of thousands of repetitions, her posture straightening, her eyes forward. For just a moment, the woman in the simple black dress disappeared, replaced by the operator she'd been trained to be. When the salute ended, Caldwell's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Miss Cross," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite the rain. "My apologies for the confusion at the entrance. Your invitation came through specialized channels. Not everyone has the clearance to verify it." He turned to Morrison and Chun, both of whom looked like they wanted the ground to swallow them whole. "This woman is my personal guest. She has full access to tonight's event and any restricted areas within. Am I understood?" "Yes, sir," they responded in unison, their voices barely above whispers. Caldwell extended his arm toward Maya. "May I escort you inside?" Maya glanced at his offered arm, then back at his face. There was something in his eyes, not pity, but understanding. He knew what she'd just experienced, the humiliation of being reduced to nothing after giving everything. He'd probably seen it happen to others like her, the men and women who operated in the shadows, and returned to a world that refused to acknowledge they'd ever left. "Thank you, Admiral," Maya said, taking his arm. They walked together through the entrance, leaving Morrison and Chin standing in awkward silence. As they passed through the doors, Maya could feel every pair of eyes in the vicinity tracking their movement. The whispers would start soon. Who was she? What was her relationship to Admiral Caldwell? What had earned her such extraordinary recognition? The interior of the museum had been transformed for the Gala. The massive exhibition hall, normally housing naval artifacts and historical displays, had been converted into an elegant ballroom. Crystal chandeliers supplemented the ambient lighting, casting a warm glow over the assembled guests. A string quartet played soft classical music in one corner, while white-clothed tables bearing elaborate floral arrangements created intimate conversation spaces throughout the room. At the far end, a raised platform held a podium adorned with the seals of the United States Navy and NATO. "I didn't expect to see you here, sir," Maya said quietly as they navigated through the crowd. "Last I heard, you were dealing with a situation in the North Atlantic." Caldwell's expression remained neutral, but there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "You're still plugged into the intelligence stream. I see. Even after retirement. Force of habit. Habits like that can be dangerous." He guided her toward a quieter section of the hall, away from the main clusters of guests. "But to answer your question, Admiral Thornton specifically requested my presence. He and I served together in the Persian Gulf back in the 90s. Some bonds don't fade, even when the world moves on." They stopped near a display case containing a model of a destroyer. Caldwell released Maya's arm and turned to face her directly. "I'm going to be blunt, Miss Cross, because I suspect you appreciate directness more than diplomatic dancing. The fact that you're here in person, accepting a public invitation to a high-profile military event, concerns me. You, of all people, should understand the risks of exposure." Maya had expected this conversation. She'd rehearsed it mentally a dozen times since receiving the invitation. "With respect, sir, I've been out for 5 years. Anyone who wanted to find me has had plenty of time. Physical location and public association are two very different things," Caldwell countered. "You know, how many foreign intelligence services would love to identify and catalog personnel from your former unit? The moment someone photographs you here, connects your face to this event, starts asking questions about who you are and why a NATO commander saluted you in front of witnesses." "Then maybe I'm tired of hiding," Maya said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Maybe I'm tired of being erased, of having my service treated like it never happened, of watching people get honored for achievements while the people who made those achievements possible have pretend they don't exist." Caldwell studied her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted, less commanding and more empathetic. "I understand that frustration, more than you might think, but the operational security requirements that govern your former unit are the reason I can't get a normal job, can't form lasting relationships, can't even go to therapists when the nightmares get bad," Maya interrupted. "I know the rules, Admiral. I lived by them for years. But I also know that those rules are sometimes less about genuine security and more about institutional convenience. It's easy to deny we exist and to figure out how to honor what we did." A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne flutes. Caldwell took 2 and offered one to Maya. She accepted it, though she had no intention of drinking. Alcohol and PTSD were a dangerous combination, and the stress of tonight's confrontation had already set her nerves on edge. "You're not entirely wrong," Caldwell admitted. "The system isn't perfect. Hell, it's barely functional when it comes to acknowledging the contributions of Special Access Program personnel. But that system exists for reasons that go beyond bureaucratic ass-covering. The Black Dagger unit has been instrumental in preventing conflicts that would have cost thousands of lives. Your work in Karachi in 2018 officially didn't happen," Maya finished. "I know. I was there. That operation disrupted a terrorist network that was 6 weeks away from launching coordinated attacks across 4 continents. The intelligence you gathered led to the arrest of 73 individuals and the seizure of enough explosive material to level a city block. And officially, it never happened, which means officially, you were never there, which means officially, we can't thank you for preventing a catastrophe. Maya took a sip of champagne, letting the bubbles sting her tongue. So, why did you salute me out there? That wasn't exactly keeping a low profile. Caldwell's expression hardened slightly. Because those two security personnel were about to manhandle a decorated veteran off the premises like common trash. Because sometimes the right thing to do supersedes operational security concerns. And because... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because I've seen too many people like you break under the weight of being invisible. The suicide rate among former Special Access Program personnel is 3 times higher than the general veteran population. 3 times. And that's just the cases we know about. The music shifted to a more upbeat tempo as more guests arrived. Maya recognized several faces from news broadcasts, admirals whose names were household words, at least in military circles. These were people who commanded fleets, who testified before Congress, who appeared on talk shows and wrote memoirs. These were people who existed in the official narrative of American military power. She was not one of those people. The invitation, Maya said, circling back to the question that had brought her here. Who really sent it? Caldwell hesitated, which told Maya more than any direct answer could have. Admiral Thornton requested that certain legacy personnel be invited to his retirement celebration, people who had contributed significantly to operations he'd overseen during his tenure as Commander of Naval Intelligence. Your name was on that list. Thornton doesn't know me. We've never met. No, but he knows your work. He signed off on the operational orders for Karachi. He was also the authorization authority for the Talon extraction, the Bangkok intercept, and the Lagos surveillance operation. He may not know your face, but he knows your file number, and he knows what you've sacrificed. Maya felt something tighten in her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite name. It wasn't gratitude exactly or validation. It was something more complicated, something that acknowledged years of living in a liminal space between recognition and denial. So this is what? Maya asked, his way of saying thank you before he rides off into the sunset? Perhaps. Or perhaps it's his way of trying to change a system he's come to see as fundamentally broken. Caldwell glanced toward the stage, where Admiral Thornton himself was now visible, greeting guests with the practiced ease of a career officer who'd spent decades navigating political waters. He was tall and silver-haired, with the kind of commanding presence that seemed to demand attention even in a room full of other high-ranking officials. Admiral Thornton has spent the last year of his service arguing for a reformation of how we handle special access personnel, Caldwell continued. He believes there should be a middle path between complete disclosure and total denial, some way to acknowledge sacrifice without compromising ongoing operations. He's made enemies in the intelligence community over it. Let me guess, Maya said. Those enemies don't want people like me getting public recognition because it raises uncomfortable questions about what we were doing and why. Something like that. Before Maya could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. 3 men in dark suits had entered, their bearing and demeanor screaming federal agents even without visible identification. They were scanning the crowd with professional thoroughness, and when one of them spotted Maya, he immediately spoke into a wrist-mounted microphone. Caldwell noticed him too. His jaw tightened. It seems your presence has attracted attention from the wrong people. Who are they? Defense Intelligence Agency, if I had to guess. Probably assigned to monitor the guest list for security anomalies. He turned to Maya, his expression serious. You have a choice to make right now, Miss Cross. You can leave quietly through the side entrance, avoid whatever conversation those agents want to have, and go back to being invisible. Or you can stay, accept whatever consequences come from being publicly associated with this event, and stand your ground. Either choice is valid. Either choice is yours. Maya looked at the approaching agents, then at Admiral Caldwell, then at the assembled crowd of officers and dignitaries who represented the visible, acknowledged face of American military power. 5 years ago, she would have chosen invisibility without hesitation. 5 years ago, she still believed that staying in the shadows was the highest form of patriotism. But 5 years of living in that shadow had taught her something else. That silence could be a prison as much as a protection. I'm staying, Maya said. Caldwell nodded slowly, something that might have been approval flickering across his face. "Then let's go meet Admiral Thornton. If you're going to make a statement, you might as well make it with proper introductions." The three DIA agents close in from different angles, a tactical approach that Maya recognized immediately as a containment formation. They were trying to box her in without making it obvious to the civilian guests. Professional, but not subtle enough to fool someone with her training. The lead agent, a man in his mid-40s with steel gray hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent time in field operations, reached them first. "Excuse me, Admiral Caldwell," the agent said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm Special Agent Marcus Reeves with the Defense Intelligence Agency. I need to have a word with your guest." His eyes flicked to Maya, sharp and assessing. "Ma'am, if you could come with me to a private area for a brief conversation." "Agent Reeves," Caldwell interrupted, his tone carrying the weight of 4 stars and decades of command authority. "Miss Cross is here as an invited guest and is under my direct supervision for the evening. If you have questions regarding her security clearance or her right to attend this event, you can direct those questions to me." Reeves' jaw tightened slightly, but his professional mask remained intact. "With respect, sir, this matter falls under DIA jurisdiction. We have protocols regarding the attendance of certain personnel at high-profile military gatherings. Miss Cross's presence has raised some flags in our monitoring systems." "What kind of flags?" Maya asked, her voice calm but firm. She was done being talked about like she wasn't standing right there. Reeves turned his attention fully to her, and Maya could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was trying to place her, figure out which box she fit into in his mental catalog of potential security threats. "Your name appears in several classified databases with unusual access restrictions. The automated screening system flagged you as a potential intelligence concern." "A concern?" Maya couldn't keep the bitter edge out of her voice. 5 years ago, I was an asset. Now I'm a concern. That's quite a demotion. "Ma'am, I don't know what your previous role was, and frankly, I don't need to. What I need is for you to come with me, so we can verify your identity and your clearance status. Standard procedure." She has an invitation signed by Admiral Thornton himself. Caldwell interjected, "Her clearance status is above your pay grade, and her identity has already been verified by me personally. Is there something about that explanation you find insufficient?" The tension was drawing attention now. Several officers had stopped their conversations to observe the confrontation. Maya could see the calculations happening in their minds. Why would a NATO commander be defending this unknown woman so vigorously? What was her connection to him? The speculation would spread through the room like wildfire. Agent Reeves seemed to recognize that he was losing the tactical advantage. "Admiral, I understand your position, but DIA has standing orders regarding unverified personnel at events where foreign military attaches are present. Miss Cross's background appears in our systems with multiple red flags and classification caveats that suggest she operated in a special access program with compartmented clearances above your current level." A new voice cut in, sharp and authoritative. Everyone turned to see Admiral James Thornton himself approaching, his dress uniform immaculate, his bearing that of a man who commanded respect for so long that it had become second nature. He moved with the deliberate pace of someone who knew that when he arrived, the situation would resolve itself. 2 captains flanked him, their expressions carefully neutral but watchful. "Agent Reeves," Thornton said, stopping directly in front of the DIA man. "I'm Admiral James Thornton. This is my retirement gala. Miss Cross received her invitation directly from my office because her service to this nation, while not publicly acknowledged, was instrumental to several operations I oversaw during my tenure as CNI. Her presence here is not only authorized but specifically requested. Do you have any questions about that?" Reeves looked like a man who just realized he'd walked into a minefield. "Sir, I'm just following protocols." "Protocols that don't account for the existence of personnel like Miss Cross," Thornton interrupted. "I'm aware of the limitations of your screening systems. They're designed to flag anomalies, not to recognize people who operate outside the normal classification structure. Consider this my direct authorization for her attendance. If your superiors have concerns, they can contact me directly." The Admiral pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to Reeves. My personal cell phone number. Feel free to call any time after the event concludes. But right now, you and your colleagues are dismissed. This is a social occasion, not a security briefing. Reeves took the card, his expression unreadable. He glanced at Maya one more time, then at Admiral Caldwell, then back to Thornton. Whatever calculation he was running. He apparently decided that fighting 3 flag officers in a room full of witnesses wasn't worth the career damage. Understood, sir. Enjoy your evening. The 3 DIA agents withdrew, moving toward the exits with professional efficiency. Maya watched them go, aware that this was far from over. They'd file reports, run deeper background checks, probably have surveillance teams follow her home. The price of visibility was constant scrutiny. Miss Cross, Admiral Thornton said, turning his full attention to her for the first time. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the marks of decades of hard decisions and sleepless nights. I apologize for that unpleasantness. I should have anticipated that DIA might run automated screenings on the guest list. My oversight. Maya found herself standing a bit straighter, old military discipline asserting itself. No apology necessary, sir. I knew coming here would attract attention. Thornton studied her with a kind of intensity that Maya had seen in other senior intelligence officers. People who'd spent careers reading between lines, finding truth in omissions, seeing patterns in chaos. You came anyway. That takes either courage or recklessness. I'm curious which one it is. Maybe both, Maya admitted. Or maybe I'm just tired of being invisible. Something flickered across Thornton's face. Recognition, perhaps, or remembrance. I read your operation reports. All of them. The language was sanitized, of course. Stripped of personal details, reduced to tactical analysis and outcome assessments. But between the lines, I could see the human cost. Karachi especially. He paused, his expression darkening slightly. You held that safe house for 18 hours while under siege from a hostile force. You extracted 3 friendly assets while wounded, navigated 12 miles through hostile territory, and delivered intelligence that disrupted a major terrorist operation. The official report says 1 operative accomplished that mission. But I've run enough operations to know that missions like that exact a price that never appears in any after-action review. Maya felt her throat tighten. No one had ever acknowledged it. Not directly. The debriefing sessions had been clinical, focused on tactical lessons learned and intelligence gathered. No one had asked what it felt like to hold a pistol with blood-slick hands while listening to people try to break through a reinforced door. No one had asked about the nightmares, or the way she still flinched at the sound of breaking glass, or the weight of knowing that 3 people were alive only because she'd been willing to kill to keep them that way. The mission was successful, Maya said, the old formula rolling off her tongue automatically. That's what matters. No, Thornton said firmly. That's what I told myself for 30 years, and it's a lie. The mission's success matters. Yes, but so does the person who achieved it. So does the cost they paid. So does acknowledging that some sacrifices leave scars that don't heal, no matter how many times we classify them as acceptable operational outcomes. Admiral Caldwell had stepped back slightly, giving Thornton space to have this conversation. Maya could see other guests watching from a distance, their curiosity evident. This was unprecedented. 2 admirals, including the guest of honor, having an intense conversation with an unknown woman in the middle of a formal gala. Why did you invite me, sir? Maya asked directly. Admiral Caldwell mentioned you've been advocating for changes in how special access personnel are handled, but bringing me here, making my presence public, that seems like more than advocacy. That seems like you're trying to make a point. Thornton smiled, a weary expression that carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. You're perceptive. Yes, I'm making a point. Several points, actually. The first is that the current system of denying the existence of people like you is not only unjust, but strategically short-sighted. We're creating an entire class of veterans who can't access proper medical care, can't receive appropriate recognition for their service, and can't reintegrate into society, because doing so would require acknowledging they were ever part of something extraordinary. He gestured to the room around them, to the officers in their dress uniforms with ribbons and medals gleaming on their chests. Every person here tonight earned their recognition through sacrifice and dedication. but their sacrifices are acknowledged, recorded, honored. Yours are not. That's wrong, and I've decided that my last act as an intelligence officer will be to start changing that paradigm, even if it's just in small ways. By inviting people like me to your retirement party, Maya couldn't keep the skepticism out of her voice. With respect, sir, that seems like symbolic gesture more than meaningful change. It's both, Thornton replied. Symbolic gestures matter when they challenge entrenched assumptions. But you're right, that gestures alone aren't enough. That's why I spent the last 6 months working with the Senate Intelligence Committee to draft legislation that would create a classified honor system for Special Access Program personnel. Recognition that wouldn't compromise operational security, but would provide some formal acknowledgement of extraordinary service. Maya felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Is that even possible? Creating a system like that without exposing operational details. It's difficult, not impossible. The British have something similar with their system of sealed honors, medals and recognitions that are awarded but not publicly announced until decades later, if ever. We could adapt that model. Thornton's expression turned serious. But it requires political will, institutional buy-in, and most importantly, it requires people like you to be willing to step out of the shadows far enough to prove you exist in the first place. That's the second point I'm making tonight. You want me to be an example, Maya said, understanding dawning. Proof that special access personnel are real people, not just file numbers and redacted reports. I want you to be what you are, a decorated veteran who deserves recognition. If that also serves as an example for institutional reform, then so be it. Thornton pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, the kind that typically held military decorations. I can't give you a medal tonight, Miss Cross. Not publicly. But I can give you this, with my personal gratitude and the unofficial recognition of everyone who knows what you really accomplished. He opened the box to reveal a simple pin, silver with a black enamel center, bearing no official insignia or designation. To any observer, it would look like a piece of costume jewelry. But Maya recognized the craftsmanship, the specific dimensions, the subtle marking along the edge that identified it as something more. This is a challenge coin variant, Thornton explained quietly, designed for personnel who can't carry traditional military honors. It's recognized by certain communities within the intelligence and special operations world, wherein it won't expose your cover, but it will identify you to those who know to look for it. Consider it a bridge between the world of shadows and the world of acknowledgement. Maya took the box, her hand surprisingly steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Accepting this means accepting visibility. It means that people will start asking questions about who you are and what you did. It means that intelligence services, ours and others, will take renewed interest in your activities. It means giving up some protective anonymity you've relied on. I understand the risks. Do you? Thornton's gaze was penetrating. Because I need you to understand something else, Miss Cross. The people who benefit most from keeping personnel, like you invisible, are not patriots protecting national security. They're bureaucrats protecting institutional power, contractors protecting profit margins, and politicians protecting their careers from inconvenient truths. Changing that system will make enemies. Are you prepared for that? Maya looked down at the pin in her hand, feeling its weight both literal and metaphorical. 5 years of living in the shadows. 5 years of watching the world move on while she remained frozen in a liminal space between soldier and civilian. 5 years of nightmares and isolation, and the grinding exhaustion of pretending she was fine when she was anything but. She thought about Morrison and Chin at the entrance, ready to throw her out like trash. She thought about the DIA agents treating her like a security threat instead of a veteran. She thought about every medical form she'd filled out that asked about her military service, where she had to choose between lying and exposing classified information. She thought about the 3 people she'd saved in Karachi, who would never know her name or her face, or the fact that she'd been willing to die for them. Yes, Maya said, closing the box with a soft snap. I'm prepared. Thornton nodded, something like satisfaction crossing his features. Good. Then let's introduce you to some people. Not everyone here tonight knows about special access programs, but there are few who do. People who can help build a coalition we need for institutional reform. Admiral Caldwell has already agreed to lend his support, and I have commitments from several other flag officers. You've been planning this for a while, Maya observed. Since the day I signed the orders that sent you into Karachi, Thornton replied. I watched the operation unfold in real time from the operations center. I saw you hold that position against impossible odds. And I realized that we were asking people to do extraordinary things while promising them nothing but erasure in return. That's not honor. That's exploitation. And I decided that before I retired, I'd do something about it. Before Maya could respond, the string quartet shifted to a fanfare-style arrangement, signaling that the formal portion of the evening was about to begin. Thornton glanced toward the stage, then back to Maya. I need to give a speech shortly. Afterward, we'll have a reception where I'd like you to meet some key people. Can you handle another hour or two of visibility? Maya straightened her shoulders, feeling the phantom weight of old gear and weapons, the muscle memory of operations where failure meant death and success meant anonymity. I can handle it, sir. I believe you can. Thornton extended his hand. Welcome back from the shadows, Miss Cross. It's long overdue. Maya shook his hand, feeling the calluses of a career officer, the strength that came from decades of bearing responsibility for the lives and missions of others. Around them, the crowd began moving toward the seating areas as the formal program prepared to begin. Admiral Caldwell stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're about to become a very interesting person to a lot of very powerful people. Some will want to help. Others will want to silence you again. Can you tell the difference? Maya thought about the years she'd spent reading human behavior in high-stress environments, identifying threats and allies in situations where a wrong judgment meant death. Yes, sir. I can tell the difference. Good, because the next few months are going to test that ability repeatedly. The speech that Admiral Thornton delivered from the stage was everything one would expect from a senior officer's retirement address. Eloquent reflection on a career spanning decades, gratitude to fellow service members, acknowledgement of family sacrifice, and carefully optimistic observations about the future of naval intelligence in an increasingly complex geopolitical landscape. But those who knew Thornton well, who understood the subtle language of military politics, could detect an undercurrent of something more pointed in his words. Maya sat at a table near the back of the hall, positioned where she could observe the room while remaining relatively unobtrusive. Admiral Caldwell had joined her, along with two other officers he'd quietly introduced, Captain Sarah Chun, a naval intelligence officer with 2 decades of experience in special operations liaison, and Commander James Redfern, who worked in the CNO Strategic Planning Division. Both had security clearances high enough to understand, if not know the details of, programs like the one Maya had served in. He's laying groundwork, Chun whispered to Maya as Thornton spoke about the evolution of intelligence work in the 21st century. Watch how he's framing the contribution of unnamed personnel. He's creating space for the conversation he wants to have. Maya listened more carefully, picking up on the patterns Chun had identified. Thornton was speaking about the invisible hands that prevent conflicts before they begin, about personnel who serve without expectation of recognition, about the moral obligation to honor all who serve, even when that honor must remain classified. To most of the audience, it probably sounded like standard boilerplate, the kind of generic acknowledgement that every senior officer included in speeches about intelligence work. But to those paying attention, it was a clear signal of intent. He's going to face significant pushback, Redfern murmured. The compartmented programs community thrives on complete deniability. Creating any formal recognition system, even a classified one, undermines that principle. Maybe that principle needs to be undermined, Maya replied quietly. When the cost of maintaining deniability is higher than the benefit, it's time to reconsider the policy. Chin shot her an appraising look, spoken like someone who's paid that cost personally. Haven't we all? Maya gestured subtly to include the officers at the table. Everyone in the intelligence community makes sacrifices. The difference is that most of you can at least acknowledge those sacrifices to yourselves and your families. People like me can't even do that. The speech concluded polite, but genuine applause. Thornton stepped down from the stage, immediately surrounded by well-wishers and colleagues wanting to offer their congratulations. Maya watched the social dynamics play out, the practiced handshakes, the meaningful glances, the small clusters of conversation where the real business of military politics happened. This was a world she'd only ever glimpsed from periphery, never fully participated in. "He'll break away in about 10 minutes, Caldwell said, checking his watch. "Then we'll move to the Admiral's reception room for a smaller gathering. That's where the real conversations will happen." "Who else will be there?" Maya asked. Thornton has been selective about the invitations. Maybe 20 people total. A mix of flag officers, senior defense officials, and a few key congressional staffers. All people with the clearances and the political capital to move reform legislation forward. Caldwell paused, then added, "There will also be 2 other former Special Access Program personnel in attendance. Thornton wants to demonstrate that you're not an isolated case." Maya felt a jolt of surprise. "Other operators?" "From my unit." "Not your specific unit, but similar programs. A man who worked in human operations in Central Asia, and a woman who was part of a cyber warfare team. Both have been out for several years and are willing to speak about their experiences, within appropriate classification boundaries, of course." The idea of meeting others who walked the same invisible path was both exciting and unsettling. For years, Maya had internalized a belief that her experiences were unique, that no one else could truly understand the specific combination of pride and frustration and isolation that came with this kind of service. The prospect of discovering that understanding might exist was almost overwhelming. The crowd began to thin as the formal program concluded, and guests started moving toward the exits or the various reception areas. Thornton finally extricated himself from the well-wishers and made his way toward Maya's table, accompanied by a woman in a Navy civilian dress who carried herself with the bearing of someone accustomed to navigating military hierarchies. "Miss Cross," Thornton said, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Jennifer Hartwell. She's a director of special programs for the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and she's been instrumental in the reform effort." Dr. Hartwell extended her hand. She was in her early 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind wireframe glasses, and the kind of professional demeanor that suggested she'd spent years managing classified information and difficult personalities. "Miss Cross, Admiral Thornton has told me about your service record. What I'm legally allowed to know about it, at least." "Which probably isn't much," Maya replied, shaking her hand. "Enough to understand that you made extraordinary sacrifices for this country, and that those sacrifices have gone largely unacknowledged. That's something I'd like to help change, if you're willing to be part of the conversation." "What does being part of the conversation entail?" Hartwell glanced at Thornton, who nodded. "Let's discuss this in a more private setting. Admiral Thornton has arranged for us to use one of the museum's conference rooms for the next phase of tonight's gathering." The group, Maya, Caldwell, Chun, Redfern, Thornton, and Hartwell, made their way through the museum's corridors to secure a conference room on the 2nd floor. The space was designed for classified briefings, with electromagnetic shielding and acoustic dampening. 2 other people were already there, waiting. The first was a man in his late 30s, lean and weathered with the kind of 1,000-yard stare that spoke of time in conflict zones. He wore a simple suit, but held himself with unmistakable military bearing. The second was a woman in her early 40s, shorter and more compact, with close-cropped dark hair and observant eyes that immediately assessed Maya as she entered. "Miss Cross," Thornton said, making introductions, "meet Marcus Webb and Dr. Alicia Foster. They both serve in special access programs and have agreed to participate in tonight's discussion." Maya shook hands with both, feeling an immediate sense of recognition. These were people who understood, people who'd lived in the same shadows, paid the same costs, carried the same invisible scars. Marcus did 6 years in human operations across Central and South Asia, Thornton explained. He ran assets in some of the most dangerous regions in the world, providing intelligence that prevented multiple terrorist attacks and helped neutralize several high-value targets. Officially, he was a State Department contractor. Unofficially, well, you understand. Webb nodded at Maya. "I heard about Karachi through the grapevine. Impressive work." "The grapevine?" Maya raised an eyebrow. Even people who officially don't exist find ways to communicate, Webb said with a slight smile. The intelligence community is smaller than you'd think, especially at the special access level. Word gets around, even if the details stay classified. Thornton turned to the woman. Dr. Foster was part of a cyber warfare unit that conducted offensive operations against foreign networks. Her work disrupted multiple espionage campaigns and protected critical infrastructure from attack. She has a PhD in computer science from MIT and could be making 10 times her government salary in the private sector, but she chose to serve. And like both of you, that service has never been officially acknowledged. Until now, potentially, Foster said. Her voice was measured, careful. Admiral Thornton has briefed us on the reform proposal. It's ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. Probably too ambitious, Thornton agreed. But I've learned that if you want to accomplish difficult things, you need to aim even higher and accept that you'll probably fall short. If we aim for a comprehensive reform of how we handle special access personnel and end up with even incremental improvements, that's still progress. Dr. Hartwell opened a briefcase and pulled out several folders, each marked with classification headers. Let me outline what we're proposing. The goal is to create a system that balances 3 competing priorities: operational security, personal recognition, and institutional accountability. She distributed the folders to Maya, Webb, and Foster. The documents inside detailed a proposed framework for a classified service recognition program that would allow personnel from special access programs to receive formal acknowledgement of their service without compromising specific operational details. Maya scanned the documents, her analytical mind immediately identifying both the potential and the problems. This would require buy-in from multiple agencies, DoD, CIA, NSA, FBI, probably others, and each of those agencies has institutional reasons to resist any system that makes their special access programs more visible, even to clear personnel. Correct, Hartwell said, which is why we need proof of concept. We need to demonstrate that limited acknowledgement doesn't compromise operational security. We need to show that veterans from these programs can speak about their general experiences without exposing specific, classified details. We need to humanize what's currently treated as purely abstract operational necessity. And that's where we come in, Webb said, understanding dawning, with a demonstration case. The proof that people from special access programs can exist in public space without the sky falling. Essentially, yes, Thornton confirmed. I've been working with congressional allies to schedule a closed hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee, not a public hearing. That would be impossible given classification constraints. But a formal congressional session where you could testify about your experiences in general terms. The personal cost of invisible service. The challenges of reintegration. The need for better support systems. Maya felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Testify? In front of Congress? In a secure facility, before a limited group of senators with appropriate clearances, with significant restrictions on what you could discuss, Hartwell clarified. But yes, it would be formal testimony. It would be recorded, and it would become part of the congressional record, albeit a classified portion of that record. You'd be creating official acknowledgement of our existence, Foster said slowly, working through the implications. Right now, we exist only in compartmented databases that maybe a few hundred people can access. This would expand that dramatically. It would also potentially paint targets on our backs, Maya added. Foreign intelligence services monitor congressional activities. Even classified hearings leak information. They'd start connecting dots, building profiles, identifying us as high-value intelligence targets. Caldwell, who'd been quiet during most of this exchange, finally spoke. Those are valid concerns. They're also concerns that apply to anyone who serves in sensitive positions. We don't tell CIA officers or special operations personnel that they can never be acknowledged because it might make them targets. We provide appropriate security, monitor for threats, and accept that service sometimes comes with ongoing risk. Why should personnel from your programs be treated differently? Because we were promised complete deniability, Maya countered. That was part of the deal when we signed on. We accepted that we'd be invisible in exchange for operational effectiveness. Changing that deal retroactively is necessary, Thornton interrupted, because the original deal was unsustainable and fundamentally unjust. I know. I helped enforce that deal for 30 years. And I've watched it break people, destroy relationships, contribute to mental health crises and suicides. The cost of maintaining complete invisibility has become greater than the benefit. We need a new paradigm. The room fell silent. Maya looked at Webb and Foster, trying to gauge their reactions. Webb's face was carefully neutral, but Foster looked troubled. What's the alternative? Foster asked quietly. If we don't participate, if we reject this proposal, what happens? Nothing, Hartwell said simply. The system continues as it is. Future personnel from special access programs face the same challenges you faced. The sacrifice continues to be unacknowledged. The institutional problems remain unaddressed. And when people like you finally reach a breaking point, there's no support structure to catch them, because officially, you never existed in the first place. Maya thought about the years since leaving the program, the isolation, the inability to form meaningful relationships because she couldn't share fundamental parts of her identity, the nightmares that she couldn't address with traditional therapy because doing so would require disclosing classified information, the constant vigilance, the hyper-awareness of threats, the difficulty of distinguishing between genuine danger and trauma-induced paranoia. She thought about the pin Thornton had given her, still in its box in her clutch purse, a small symbol of recognition, a bridge between worlds. Was that enough? Could it ever be enough? What's the timeline? She asked. The congressional hearing is tentatively scheduled for 3 months from now, Hartwell replied. That gives us time to prepare testimony, coordinate with committee staff, and establish security protocols. In the meantime, we need all 3 of you to participate in a series of preliminary meetings with DoD personnel, intelligence community representatives, and some carefully vetted journalists who cover national security issues. Journalists? Webb's eyebrows shot up. You want us to talk to reporters? In a controlled fashion, about general principles, not specific operations, Thornton clarified. Part of building support for reform is shaping the narrative. Right now, when people hear about special access programs, they think either Jason Bourne fantasies or illegal government overreach. We need a more nuanced understanding to exist in public consciousness. That requires some carefully managed media engagement. Maya's head was spinning. What had started as accepting an invitation to a retirement gala had somehow escalated into becoming the face of institutional reform for the entire special access community. It was too much, too fast, too public. But it was also, she realized, exactly what she'd been hungry for when she decided to attend tonight. Recognition, acknowledgement, the opportunity to step out of the shadows, even if only partially. I need time to think about this, she said. That's fair, Thornton replied. This is a significant decision with real consequences. Take a week. Talk to people you trust, within classification boundaries, of course. Consider what you're willing to risk and what you hope to gain. Then let us know. What about you two? Maya asked Webb and Foster, Are you signing on for this? Webb was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I'm in. I've been out for 7 years. 7 years of watching the world move on while I'm frozen in place. If there's a chance to change that for future generations, I'm willing to take the risk. Foster looked less certain. I have concerns about operational security, about the precedent this sets, about whether we're opening a door that should stay closed. She paused and sighed. But I also know that the current system is broken. So, yes, provisionally, I'm willing to participate, with a caveat that if at any point I believe this is compromising genuine security interests, I'm out. All eyes turned back to Maya. She felt the weight of their expectations, the significance of this moment. In some ways, it was like being back in Karachi, holding that safe house, knowing that her decisions would determine whether people lived or died. Except this time, the stakes weren't immediate physical survival, but something more abstract, the possibility of changing an entire institutional culture. I'll give you my answer in a week, Maya said firmly, but I want full transparency about the risks, not sanitized briefings, not optimistic assessments. I want worst-case scenarios laid out clearly. If I'm going to step into the light, I need to know exactly how many ways it could go wrong. Fair enough, Hartwell said, closing her briefcase. I'll compile a comprehensive risk assessment and have it delivered to you through secure channels. Admiral Thornton will be your primary point of contact for questions and concerns. The meeting broke up shortly after, with small conversations fragmenting off as people prepared to leave. Maya found herself standing with Marcus Webb near the conference room window, looking out at the Norfolk harbor. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming under streetlights. It's terrifying, isn't it? Webb said quietly. The idea of being visible after all these years of training ourselves to disappear. Terrifying, Maya agreed. But also, I don't know, necessary maybe? Yeah, necessary. Webb turned to face her. Listen, whatever you decide, no judgment. This path isn't for everyone. Some people need the shadows. They've built their entire identity around invisibility, and asking them to step into light is like asking them to become someone they're not. If that's you, that's legitimate. Is that you? Maya asked. Webb smiled, a tired expression that carried years of accumulated weight. I thought I'd accepted invisibility as the price of service. But then I realized I was just making excuses for a system that used me up and threw me away. Now I'm ready to fight back. In a limited, carefully controlled, classification-conscious way, of course. Maya laughed despite herself. Of course. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people who understood without needing to explain. Finally, Webb pulled out a business card, unmarked except for a phone number, and handed it to Maya. If you want to talk, compare notes, discuss what happens next, call me. We're in this together now, whether we wanted to be or not. Maya took the card, adding it to the growing collection of contact information she'd acquired tonight. Thanks. I might take you up on that. Admiral Caldwell appeared at her elbow. I've arranged for a car to take you home. Unmarked, driven by someone from my personal security detail. Given tonight's visibility, I don't think it's wise for you to use public transportation or civilian ride shares. More protective custody than courtesy? Maya observed. Both. The D-Day agents from earlier filed a report. That report will generate interest from multiple intelligence agencies, both domestic and foreign. For the next few days, you should assume you're under surveillance. Don't be paranoid, but be aware. I'm always aware. I know. That's part of the problem. Caldwell's expression softened slightly. This life you've been living, constant vigilance, perpetual threat assessment, never fully relaxing, it's not sustainable long-term. One of the goals of Thornton's reform effort is to create support structures that allow people like you to stand down from that heightened state, to find some measure of peace. Can people like us ever really find peace? Maya asked. We've seen too much, done too much. The things we know about the world, about human capability for violence and deception, you don't forget that. You don't turn it off. No, Caldwell agreed, but you can learn to live with it. You can find meaning beyond the operational. You can build connections with people who understand, who share the burden. That's what tonight was really about, Miss Cross. Not just institutional reform, but creating community. Reminding people like you that you're not alone. Maya felt something tighten in her chest again, that complicated emotion that she still couldn't quite name. It was acknowledgement and validation, and the painful recognition of how desperately she needed exactly this kind of conversation. Thank you, sir, she said quietly, for everything tonight, for the salute at the entrance, for standing up to the DIA, for including me in this initiative. It means more than I can adequately express. You're welcome, but save your thanks for when we actually accomplish something. Right now, we're just laying groundwork. The real work starts next week. The drive home was quiet. The driver, a naval lieutenant with the watchful eyes of someone trained in security operations, didn't attempt conversation beyond basic pleasantries. Maya sat in the back seat, watching the city slide by through rain-streaked windows, processing everything that had happened. Her apartment, when she finally reached it, felt simultaneously familiar and alien. This was the space she'd carefully cultivated over 5 years, a neutral, anonymous environment that revealed nothing about her past or her capabilities. Minimal furniture, no photographs, nothing that would identify her as anything more than another anonymous civilian going through the motions of an ordinary life. But tonight had shattered that anonymity. Tonight, she'd allowed herself to be seen. And while part of her mind was already calculating threats and running security protocols, another part felt something that might almost have been relief. She pulled out the pen Admiral Thornton had given her, examining it under the light. Such a small object, such enormous implications. She set it on the coffee table, next to the business cards from Webb, Caldwell, and Hartwell. Evidence. Proof that tonight had actually happened, that she hadn't imagined the possibility of change. Her phone buzzed, a secure message from an encrypted number. She opened it to find a brief note from Admiral Thornton. Miss Cross, thank you for your courage tonight. Whatever you decide about moving forward, know that your service has been seen and appreciated. The path ahead won't be easy, but it's necessary. We'll speak soon. JT. Maya read the message 3 times, then deleted it per standard security protocol. But the words lingered in her mind as she finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion of the evening. She'd gone to Gala expecting nothing more than a quiet evening, acknowledging the retirement of an admiral she'd never met. Instead, she'd been confronted with the possibility of something she thought impossible: recognition, community, and the chance to help ensure that future operators wouldn't face the same isolation she had. The question now was whether she was brave enough to accept that possibility, with all its attendant risks. As Maya prepared for bed, she caught a reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked tired, stressed, older than her years. But she also looked, for the first time in a long time, like someone who might have a future beyond survival. The black dagger tattoo on her shoulder was visible, no longer hidden beneath clothing designed to conceal. She traced the design with her fingers, remembering the day she'd gotten it. Young, idealistic, believing that serving in the shadows was the highest form of patriotism. She'd learned since then that patriotism came in many forms. And maybe, just maybe, stepping into the light could be its own kind of service. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Marcus Webb. Can't sleep either? The visibility hangover is real. Coffee tomorrow if you want to talk. MW. Maya smiled slightly and typed back, 0900, send me the address. For the first time in 5 years, she was looking forward to tomorrow, looking forward to a conversation with someone who understood, looking forward to the possibility, however uncertain, of something better. The shadows had been her home for so long. But maybe, she thought as she finally turned off the lights, it was time to find out what else she could be. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that history had shifted slightly tonight, that 3 veterans who'd served in darkness had taken the first steps toward light, that an admiral's retirement gala had become the launching point for something that might, eventually, change how a nation honored its most invisible warriors. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the streets clean and gleaming. A new day was coming, with all its uncertainty and possibility. And for the first time in years, Maya Cross was ready to face it.